ours, APAC EMEA. Uh, I'm Deb and logging in from Toronto. It's 6:02 over here, and welcome to today's office hours. I I've been working with Adobe Analytics for about I think now 10 years almost. And with my current company Deloitte for about 8 years, and mostly focusing on data analysis and data architecture consultation and building a lot of SDRs. So that's a little bit about me.
Cool. I can go next. Hello, everyone. Welcome. I'm Iwana, currently connecting from London. I'm a senior analytics manager for IBM, and I've been focusing on this kind of web analytics space for the last 6, 7 years. I'm leading an insights and analytics team at IBM Consulting. And yeah, this is my first year as an Adobe Analytics champion, and super excited about these sessions. Um,
I'll go next.
Coco? Okay.
Okay. My name's Mandy. I'm also a member of the Analytics Champions group, and I am joining from St. John's, Newfoundland. I've been working in analytics for about 5 years now, and I'm a senior analyst at Best Buy Canada. Pass it off to Goku.
Yeah, good morning, everyone. My name is Gokul, and I bring over 8 years of experience into web analyst, and I have had the privilege of working with different sectors such as e-commerce, banking, healthcare, and hospitality industry. And throughout my career, I've been involved in the process of web analytics, specializing into Adobe Analytics tools such as Workspace, Target, and recently I got an opportunity to work into the Adobe launch as well. So my responsibilities have included developing measurement frameworks and defining key performance indicators and uh, overseeing the successful implementation of Adobe Analytics across digital properties, including web and mobile platforms. I hold a master degree in software engineering in a reputed university in India. So that's a brief about me, and pretty much excited about this session as well. Thank you.
Great. I think we have three attendees who have joined us today. Mandy, would you suggest waiting a minute or should we just get going?
Get started because the session is being recorded and will be available online afterwards as well. So, yeah, the session will be recorded. So anybody who joins late can catch the beginning recording
Sure,
online later.
makes sense. Okay, a little housekeeping. We will be going through some of the questions that were earlier submitted, and you can always let us know if you want to add any questions for later sessions, or if you want us to answer some of the questions here. Between us, we're heavily on the business practitioner persona side, so we'll try to get through most of the questions. But if we don't, we can follow up by experience league, or we will park it for our next office hours. Um, and yeah, I think with that we get started and keep dropping any questions in the chat and we'll try to go through them. Let me know when you can see my screen. I'm just gonna switch between screens. You'll have to excuse me. I'm doing the screen sharing for the first time. But I think I've got this. Okay,
Yep.
great.
Yeah, looks good.
Okay, let's go. So we have had a few questions that came through, and hopefully we can get to most of them. We're going to start right with one which says how campaign tracking is done in Adobe Analytics, and some of us have added information over here, and we can just leave it this way. You can also maybe Iona and Gokul, you want to get started and talk about it, and then we can
Yeah,
provide. Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. I can give you my view on things. So usually, the best way to do this for campaigns, because obviously you have placements on all different sort of platforms and types of media, is to have query parameters attached to your URLs that take the user back to your website. There are some examples there for the campaign URLs, the sort of query parameter values that it's good to have. But to give you a very specific example from my organization is we developed a very specific format that works well with our business. So that query parameter string will have different values concatenated, and they are specific to the product that we work with. So there will be one, as in the example there, with the source, the campaign name, but then we go even further if we want to know what product it focuses on, if there's even the domain of the platform that our ad or placement has been published on. And then in Adobe Analytics, you can use classification to use all these concatenated values from the string to transform them into additional metrics dimensions you can use in Adobe Analytics. So you'll have the tracking code in Adobe Analytics that you can obviously see how much traffic it brings to your website. But then with the classification help, you can go into detail for each of those values you have in the tracking code and report by campaign name or by channel or by the product name. It depends on what you're interested in. But the values given in the examples there are very useful because they're quite generic, and that's something that's being used, I think, for other analytics products as well. Um, Anyone wants to add anything else there?
Yeah, one of the oh, so one of the ways we look at campaign tracking codes is that we ensure that there's a bit of the metadata information around the placement itself, and that helps when you want to analyze at the campaign tracking code level. So what we do is, since we have global sites, the first part of the tracking code, I was talking about the concatenation. So the first part we add the country, and then the second part we add, like, if this is an engagement campaign or an awareness campaign. And then in the third part we add, like, okay, is this which channel of it? So we've had, like, as in social paid, or we'll have paid LinkedIn. So we would add PL in the tracking code. And then the fourth section we would add, like, okay, if this is from a particular campaign name, we would have that in the tracking code. And we kind of, this whole concatenation, it shows up as a tracking code, and from there we split each of them into different dimensions over here in your reporting. So you can report by, like, say, okay, how many of my awareness campaigns are doing are getting traffic, or my engagement campaigns. So using the campaign tracking code, we add these additional reports that we can split them by and look at data from different perspectives. We have done placements also. We had the placement sizes also in the tracking code. Like, we would say this is the 4 by 6, or just giving you some random measurement. So we would add the metadata of the placement in the campaign tracking code, so you can go down to that level and say, like, oh, okay, I'm actually having more traction from these placements, um, which all lead to the same URL. So it's easier to break this down by this metadata and then look at how each of these placements work. So that's something which we additionally do with some of the tracking codes that we have. But in general, it's the campaign tracking code is also used in your marketing processing rules, and based on what you add, like we do LinkedIn paid. So based on that value in the campaign tracking code, we direct all our LinkedIn paid traffic to a marketing channel called social, and then we can break that down into the campaign source and campaign channel that way. So there's a lot happening, and you can do a lot of stuff with the campaign tracking code, and there's a lot of flexibility there. Google, anything you would add, like from your experience?
You're
Oh,
muted. We
unmute.
can't hear what you're saying.
Sorry, yeah. So I just wanted to explain about the commonly used parameters for the campaign tracking. So as you, Iona and Deb explained, so when you create a new marketing campaign, whether it is an email campaign or a social media promotion or any pay-per-click PPC campaign or any other type of marketing initiatives, you need to tag those URLs associated with that particular campaign. So this tagging is typically done by appending special parameters, like concatenating the special parameters to the destination URLs. So as in the explanation it was mentioned, the most commonly used parameters are UTM source, UTM medium, and UTM campaign, which are the generic ones, as I mentioned. And UTM source is nothing but identifies the source of the traffic. For example, it is coming from either search engines like Google or or any other source like Facebook or newsletter, etc. So UTM medium is nothing but specifies the medium of the traffic, whether it can be through email or CPC or social. And UTM campaign is it is specifically, it is named the specific campaigns. For example, uh, if there is any Black Friday sale, or if there is any new summer sale, or if there is any new product is getting launched, so everything will get mentioned in that UTM campaign. So I can give you the example URL that everything will get concatenated in that particular URL, and based on that we will collect the data whenever the user clicks on that particular data. So, and then we used to report it once the campaign tracking data is collected. We can analyze it in Adobe Analytics report to evaluate the performance of those marketing campaigns. Yeah.
Okay, great. Moving on to the next question that we have. Uh, where should a developer place the Adobe Analytics tracking code within our website's HTML? Google, would you like to give that a go? And then we can add on to that.
Yeah, so basically, uh, uh, the normal procedure is, I believe that the Adobe Analytics tracking code that they are referring over here is the Java snippet code of that Adobe Analytics. So y- generally, as a JavaScript code, you will be placing in the HTML page before the closing of the head tag. That is a general process. And other than that, there is the other process as well. We can keep that in the before closing the body tag as well, or else we will be able to uh, place that Java snippet code in asynchronous mode, that is separately in the JavaScript file as well. And most commonly used way nowadays is everybody uses the tag management system, so we will be able to put that Java, I mean the analytics code in the tag management system as well, uh, in order to collect the data. So this is the actual way where we used to place the analytics tracking code other than HTML.
Okay. So, most of the time we get asked this question, like, I'm a product owner for Adobe Analytics within my firm. And when teams come to us, there's a developer who comes to us and the business who comes to us and asks us, we want to have Adobe Analytics as a tagging solution on our site. And most of the time, what happens is we say that, okay, we're good with that, but let us know what kind of traffic you're expecting to the site, right? And we can give you the snippet code and you can put it on your site. And they sometimes assume that, okay, once you've done that, you get analytics reporting immediately. So that's sometimes some of the experience we have, that we have to walk them through that. Okay, once you've add this submit code onto your site, you also need to come back and figure out how you're going to kind of configure the dimensions and metrics that you are interested in for your site. So that's an important aspect that is assumed, where reporting starts this way, like on the go. There are traffic metrics. I'm not saying that you won't immediately have reporting, but there are traffic metrics that are like standard ones, like visits and your bounces, entries. Those immediately start showing data. But if you want to look at your countries, like say if you're a global site, if you want to look at your countries, you have to configure those variables and get started and work with someone to build a solution design reference document and define certain variables before you can report out on that. So it's important to understand, like, okay, let me get the snippet, put it on the site, and from there, if I need to start showing reporting. So some teams we have, they kind of tell us that, okay, we'll just add the traffic metrics and look at what kind of traction we're getting, and then see if we want to invest more in this tagging solution. And then there are teams who come to us with the business analyst who knows how to set up each of these dimensions and metrics, and we work with them as well. So it's important to understand that even though you get the snippet, put it on the site, what you can expect. And from there, think about your report suite, what kind of time zone you want the reporting on, how much expected traffic per day, like how many page views are you going to see. So when you're setting up a whole new report suite, it's important to have this information in advance and set it up, and talk to someone who knows a little bit about configuring all those reporting, custom reporting, rather than just taking what's out of the box when you add that snippet to the site. So just a little bit there, for anyone who's asked this question on how do we and where do we place it. This is a next step after you place that code on your site. So yeah, anything else you would add?
No, nothing else from me on this one.
Okay, then let me check the chat quickly if we have any questions as of now. No, so we're going to move ahead. um yeah, traffic from direct traffic keeps increasing. Are there any updates or recommendations? uh I'll start with this one. So direct traffic, it's a product of how you set it up in the order of your processing rules in your admin section. So that's something in your admin team would know, or if it's you, then you know what I'm talking about. But it's the order in which you put it in your processing rules. Direct traffic comes from multiple sources. One is, it could be typed out. Basically, there's the referrer is the site itself, and bookmarked is if someone has bookmarked a link and they're using that bookmark on their browser to come to your site every time. That's one way you'd see direct traffic. Third way, which is not a very nice way, but sometimes when we have campaigns running, we sometimes forget to add the campaign tracking code. So someone clicks on a link and comes to your site, there's no referrer, they're just coming directly to the site. And then that is how you would see direct traffic, right? um, Now, if your traffic is increasing over time from direct traffic, one, you would need to kind of break down and see, is it only for a certain page or is it for the whole site? That's one thing to make sure that, is it part of an industry trend that's happening across the channel itself? or if it's just for my campaign. If it is just for your campaign, it's quite possible that campaign tracking codes were not added. Say if it's not the case and you're seeing it across the site, then it could be a result of some browser features that are coming in from different products. One of the ones that I wanted to bring to this group's notice, and I believe I'll be dropping a link in the chat, while I cannot add attachments, one of the updates is called link track protection, which has come from Apple, and you can read all about it. I don't want to get into too much detail over here, because I get a little bit too passionate about this subject because we've been recently tracking it. But this is a link to a document which client care gave about these details, which is stripping off the campaign tracking codes in some of the cases. And if there are a few conditions where you would see this happening. Take a look at it. It started with certain OSs and certain browsers. Safari, of course, has it. And when the tracking code is stripped away from the URL, then you would see traffic going into direct. So these are some of the reasons. I would say from a recommendations perspective, what you could do is, and this is just a pen to paper calculation which we have tried out, is to see an overall trend of traffic share from direct. Like, say for example, you get 100 visits to your site, and out of that, say 5 to 15% is going into direct traffic. So that's kind of like an over a 12-month period, right? So if your traffic to your particular campaign page, say for example, is above that 15%, you can assume that the remaining about 15% is actually coming from a byproduct of these privacy features. So that's just something to work with those numbers. I'm not saying that's a solution, it's just something to understand, and the way you want to understand those numbers when reporting it out to the business. So you see a trend and you can assume that, okay, my r- regular share of traffic from direct is around 5 to 15%. Anything about this could be a result of these updates. uh Anything else we would add?
I
I
think
guess
one thing. Oh, go
you
ahead.
go, Mandy. No, you go.
Okay. I was just gonna say the one thing I would also check is like looking into your marketing channel processing rules specifically, and checking what other rules you've got in there, and make sure nothing has been changed accidentally.
Yeah.
Because especially if your organization has multiple admins, it's very easy to click something and change it accidentally. So do a review of not just your direct marketing channel, but your other channels as well, and make sure that they're still capturing everything that they should be capturing. And then, of course, make sure the rules are still in the right order so that, all of your paid and organic channels come before the direct.
Yep.
That's exactly what I was about to say. I think also if you have any kind of new subdomains popping up, working out with the internal filters because you don't know where these could end up. And usually what I struggle most with is, teams keep changing when you work with agencies that are in charge of media. So it's very likely that when new people come in, they don't know the processes about those tracking codes being used for campaigns. So it's a constant kind of struggle to make sure it's being followed through. But yeah, that's all I wanted to add.
That's a good segue into our next question, which is around how can we ensure accurate, reliable data collection. I'm not going to jump in right away. If anyone wants to give it a go
Um,
first.
I can add a couple of points, but maybe it would be good to open up the tabs because I think
Oh,
there's some
sure.
stuff
Yeah,
in
yeah.
there as well. I guess from my perspective, I don't do the development, so there's a side to that as well. But what we try to do is to be very much involved in the development process from an analytics side of things. So when the developer completes their work and we start validating their work and we start doing the configuration in Adobe Launch and seeing the data coming through, we do quite tight testing and quite controlled testing as well to ensure that the clicks or whatever we do, the interactions with the components, we get the numbers through. And sometimes we even ask every person that's part of the validation and testing process to use their own query parameters, and then we filter out by these to see if the numbers, if form submissions or anything like that is coming through correctly. These are just like simple things you can do. They're not very technical, but it massively helps us at least understand if there's, you know, use cases where the data is not coming through, or a browser or anything like that. And we also, I had another point on this. We also do this with, it depends if you're a consultant or you work directly in a company, but we do this with clients as well, because if we do a live demo to them, and we show them, you know, the server calls, how they send data through Adobe Analytics, how the data comes through, it makes them trust the data as well, so they can rely on it and they can use it to make their own decisions. And that actually, that sort of transparency really helps. Yeah, anything else from you?
I think I would add on this. It's important to have good collaboration between your developers, your implementation specialists, and your reporting analysts. Um, so like each team, there needs to be, you know, visibility between the processes. There needs to be open lines of communication. That way, if there is something, you know, wrong with, you know, one step in the chain, like there's, you know, a piece of information that's missing, you know, you can go back to the developers and, you know, work with them, figure out what's missing. And alternatively, if they're implementing tracking and they're not completely sure how it's going to be reported on, they can reach out to analysts. And so it's good to have that flow of communication to make sure that everything gets put in properly. But then once you have your tracking in place, making sure that it continues to be reliable over time, I find is where the real challenge lies, because, you know, as new features are constantly launched to the site, even if people are QAing, it's impossible to QA every variable on your site every time something new is released, which is why it's important to have regular audits. So that's something that our organization does on an annual basis, and we're looking at making it biannual as well, like doing it twice a year. I guess that'd be periannual, not biannual. But basically doing it twice a year instead of once a year, because there is so much that changes so quickly. And in that audit, we go through every variable that we have. Anything that's not working, we submit bug tickets for. Anything that we don't use anymore, we offboard. That way, we're not trying to maintain something that is not serving a purpose for us. And definitely, you know, looking at the data in workspace, but also looking at the debugger directly on the website to make sure that everything that's coming into the hit is correct there.
Cockle, is there something you'd like to add?
Yeah. So most of the points which has been explained by Ayana and Mandy, yes, and so I just add from my point of view a couple of things. So we have to leverage the debugging tools which has been offered by Adobe Analytics, so which allows you to inspect everything like tracking calls, troubleshoots issues, etc. In the real time. And also we can utilize the Adobe Analytics real-time reports, so that we will be able to monitor the actual incoming data and verify that tracking uh, uh, in the real time. So uh, checking the real-time reports for different traffic variables or metrics and other user interactions as they occur on your website or app, you will be able to identify where is the actual issue. So that is one of the best practice. um, that we will be able to ensure the data is accurate, and everybody will be able to agree that they can believe that the data which they are seeing is accurate. So that's it from my end.
Yeah. I think there's also a perception piece to this. Like, as consumers of the data within our organization, we need to build that culture of trust, that, what data you're seeing, what is being collected, what's being reported is actually accurate. So, some of the times like Manny said, you bring everyone into the conversation, and even the consumers of the data. What we did was, we got together with some of the marketers of the big campaigns. We have blockbuster campaigns, evergreen campaigns. We asked them what metrics they report on mostly, and we prioritize those metrics and those events which are firing, and of course our traffic metrics, and we set up alerts. And we also looked at a tool called as Observe Point. So we prioritize these metrics, put them into this tool called Observe Point, and we have these audits that run on a regular basis on the site, where we can see if there's an event that's not firing. You can also set up alerts in the tool itself to say, like, okay, suddenly a country site is not seeing traffic. So we have 100 plus country sites, and tracking them alone is not humanly possible, as a person. So we use tools like that to set up alerts if there's no traffic coming in, if certain events from top pages, or at least from our home pages, are not seeing traffic, or are not seeing like a top metric, like a video view or a download, because most of our content is very B2B focused. So those kind of measures, when you put in place, it also helps you figure out where there's some of these mistakes happening, because debugging and troubleshooting an actual problem that is, there's a gap in data collection, takes time. And when you use tools like this, it gets you to those answers much faster. So that has helped us in the past, and using alerts is an easy way of going about that. But overall, I feel like we need to communicate all these measures that we're taking, and also build that trust within the organization among the users, that hey, you are seeing the accurate data. So that's something that we work towards, from both from the custodians of the data as well as from the consumers of the data. So I hope that helps
I think
with
to
these questions. Yeah.
add one other point to it that I forgot to mention earlier, but John actually dropped a link in the
Yeah.
chat for the Adobe Analytics Health Dashboard, which is a tool that at our organization we recently set up to start using as well. And for anybody that hasn't used it before, it's incredibly powerful. It's built out in Excel, and it's able to look at all of the data from your report suite and show you either like a daily or a weekly view. I think it goes back 12 weeks to show if there's been changes in the amount of traffic for every single prop, EVAR, and event that you have. So adding this to your like standard reporting. So if you check this like, once a week or once every couple weeks to see if there's been any changes in your data, it's a great resource to use.
Great. Thanks for that.
And I will also call out, Josh mentioned in the chat, he'd be curious to hear some feedback about Observe Point. I haven't worked with them personally, but curious about the value and ease of use. Um, I used their Observe Point a little bit at my last job. It was mostly our implementation team that had it, but I got to see some of the reports. So I don't know about setting it up, but reading the reports I found fairly easy. They're quite comprehensive. I don't
Yeah.
know if Deb, if you can talk to the setup or anything.
Yeah, I think setting up, so the customer success managers are really helpful, and they help you walk through creating audits. So that's good. and they help, depends on what kind of license you get from them. They will help you create audits. You can even look at page to page auditing. You can put a journey like, okay, if my visitor comes to the home page, clicks this and goes to this, how does it look like? So ObservePoint has that capability to check and audit each of those actions and see if the right events are firing and if it's doing all that well. I would say it's not a tool for a beginner. It would be someone who has a business analyst background as well as knows your implementation well. So I would give that as you know the feedback around that. But very helpful. We do our consent management from that as well. So each country has a different consent management model, and we track if the right model is going through using theirs. And it's not just that. You can check if there's image drops, if there are pages are not loading. There's a lot that you can track using that tool. So I'll stop right there. I don't want to speak more on observe point for now, but yeah, that's helped us. Let's move to our next question. Let's see, what do we have next? um, about data retention policy in Adobe Analytics. How can we manage data storage limits? Did we have anything about this? I believe we have some response over here. Um,
I mean, I can talk to this if you
yeah,
guys want. So with Adobe and Workspace, the default retention policy is 25 months. So if your organization doesn't have a specific retention policy set up, that is what it will default to. It might change depending on what subscription level you have, but I think I read most of them should be 25 months for the default. But beyond that, you can reach out to Adobe and set up like a longer or a shorter time. A longer one will, add stuff to your contract, so it'll cost your company additional. And I don't really know why you would go shorter. Like having 25 months is, a good amount. That way you can get those year-over-year analyses if you need. Um, in terms of the data storage limit, I don't think there's really limited, just is based on how many months your retention policy is. But the more data that you're trying to pull in Workspace, it will take longer to load. So if you do reach out and extend your retention policy beyond that, when you're trying to load those really old date ranges, it will take longer for it to process. Um, and I will also call out if you use either data warehouse or data feeds to export the data, the retention policy doesn't apply to those. Once you take the data out of Workspace, you can hold on to it for essentially as long as you want. So if you're using data feeds to put everything in a data lake, the limit of how long you can keep it is really just up to how much storage you want to pay for in your data lake. Um, so yeah, so that's one way if you want to try and get longer time periods of data is, using those exports and saving the data elsewhere. Anyone want to add anything else?
I don't have much on this one, to be honest. I'm currently not a super admin, so this is kind of decided at a higher level of how, as you say, it depends on how much they're paying, and we're just being told these reports will have it for like 36 months or 24 months. So what we do sometimes is we store high-level data. So we just like export high-level numbers. It will only be like, volumes of traffic and like if you have any other very important KPIs. So we have it historically. But yeah, nothing else to add really.
okay. Gokul, is there anything else you would add?
Uh, Most of the points has been explained by man.
Yeah.
So that's fine.
Okay. Yeah. Then we can move on. I believe we have a few other questions. Um, What are the most common issues in Adobe Analytics implementation and how can they be resolved? Okay, uh, let's give this a go. Um, do we want to go around the room and talk about some of the problem statements that we, I'm sure, are all working with right now?
Common issues, I say. Um, in implementation, obviously, what Mandy was referencing earlier about being very much aligned with your teams. For me, like that's been an entire journey of making sure analytics is always considered when we have a new product, when we have a new feature being developed. And even, even after we worked quite a lot, there is a case here and there where something's being developed and analytics wasn't considered from the beginning. So we have to say there's a no-go for this product because we won't be able to track it and we won't be able to tell you how it's performing. So unless we make an effort to put analytics on it, it's not going live. um, Again, it happens that sometimes when teams are adding additional features or working on existing products, that analytics can drop all of a sudden. You never know how that can go. So I believe those audits will be super helpful. Or if you have a big product that it's constantly being worked on, just by simply having a workspace set up for it and with all the metrics, it should be fairly easy for you to see if something's been dropped off after a new release, a new dimension, a value, it doesn't matter. And something that really helps us, it's not necessarily an issue, but something we've done is we made sure with every feature developed, we have intense error tracking implemented within products. So that means you're catching any sort of API issue, app issue, validation issue, it doesn't matter. And then we've set up this error workspace that goes out to a large number of people in the business, and they can check it daily and see have errors been going up for a, I don't know, finance tool we have, or do we have a huge number of 404s, or are users not interacting correctly with the form? Maybe they have this field that we have made it mandatory, but none of them is filling it because it's not obvious. Like these sort of things, for us, error tracking has been massively helpful and very easy to spot things before the users do, which is ultimately the goal. But yeah, I'll leave you guys at anything else.
Yeah. So I'll add some of the experience that I had, especially in Adobe Analytics implementation. The most frequent issues that I have faced is missing or incomplete tracking. So certain user interactions or events are not tracked, so which means that it will be leading a lot of gaps in between the data collections. So the solution to this is reviewing the tracking implementation to ensure that the tracking code is correctly implemented on all the pages, and that event triggers are properly configured as well. So mostly we used to use the debugging tool like Adobe Analytics Cloud Debugger to troubleshoot and identify is there are any missing or incomplete tracking is been uh, uh, there in the implementation. And the other thing is the data discrepancies. So the major issue that I have faced is discrepancies between the Adobe Analytics data and the other source. For example, like third party analytics platform, server logs data, stuff like that. So here also we need to conduct the uh, uh, data quality audits to identify the discrepancies uh, and investigate the actual cause of that particular discrepancies. And the other common issue is the tag management challenges. So most of the most of them using different kinds of tag managements like Insights and Telium or Adobe Launch. So difficulties in managing and deploying tracking uh, uh, using tag managements, that we need to ensure that the tag management configurations are properly set up and maintained. Uh, we need to do the regular audits and provide training and support to the tag management users to ensure the data has been collected, everything is getting tagged properly, and ensure the proficiency in using the platform effectively. So these are the some of the common mistakes that uh, I have experienced, and we will be able to do, or we will be able to get rid of these issues by regular audits and providing the actual training to those users.
Yeah, I want to echo one of the comments that Oana made about error tracking. That is super critical. And I find a lot of places either don't have the error tracking or they don't use the error tracking in their analyses to figure out, what is going wrong. So making sure that you not only got that set up, but that you're actually using it is very important. One of the things that we did at one of my previous jobs was set up a global fallback rule. And what that did was every time a page loaded on our site, it would start a counter. And once it reached a certain number of seconds, if no analytics call fired, it would trigger a global fallback rule that would basically let us know, there's no tracking firing on this page. And we would monitor that to see where it was firing and figure out where we needed to go fix issues with our implementation. So that was one thing that we found was very useful. Um, as for like other common issues and whatnot, I haven't worked a whole lot in implementation, but I'm actually being trained on it by our implementation specialist right now. And so some of the things that he has complained about is the amount of custom code. So when you have a lot of rules that are using different types of custom code, you want to make sure that you're being consistent across it. Um, you don't want to have like, like having inconsistencies across the site can make it harder to figure out what is going wrong. So he always recommends to, use like the extensions and whatnot whenever possible before writing custom code, because that is a lot harder to maintain in the long run. Yeah.
Um, I think for me, what has been one of the, I would say, challenges with an implementation is, and this is kind of a joke which we always bring up, is you kind of drown in data, starve in insights kind of situation where whenever we work with anyone who wants to start an implementation, they want to track everything. So that's kind of one of the challenges that we have when we talk to a business, as they want to track every single action, whether that makes sense or not. I think how we can work towards, what you actually need to track is what was your site made for, and is it doing what was is expected of it to do. So that's kind of the two questions we ask every business analyst or every business that comes to us. And we ask them that, okay, why are you build this site, what you're going to do with it. So that's kind of how we go about that conversation, and we build these business questions together, and then we find the tracking that would make sense for them. So whether there's always going to be technical issues uh, coming up in any implementation, whichever solution you use, but the way you track, or the way you implement and what you're implementing is, I feel, at least a bigger challenge for us, and a longer conversation with stakeholders to get to that point where they're actually tracking something that makes sense and actually gives them the right answers, not any answer. And with the beauty of Adobe Analytics and also the Bane, I would say, is that if you just drag and drop a dimension and a metric, you will get some data. So you cannot just report out on it. You should know what you're dragging and putting into that workspace. I mean, that's the power of it, and it's also kind of what you have a problem with when we work with new analysts, new businesses. So I feel that's kind of one of the issues we face with any Adobe Analytics implementation that we work with for the first time, and we look at the data. We have worked with implementations where um, two or three of the same metrics doing the same thing. There's so much of redundancies that we've tried to avoid, and we've tried to report out on. So and there's sometimes one of the issues that we see is also dual server calls for the same action. And I don't know if many know this is you are paying for each server call. So it's important to understand, like, what are you firing in that single server call, being creative about it, concatenating your evars, and using processing rules in the background, um, and so that you're not firing the same activities, or you're not increasing your costs in an implementation. So those are some of the things that we face, and keep in mind when you work with an implementation. Yeah, we have about 7 minutes. If are there any questions that we want to bring up, we can keep going. But if there are questions from this group, a very small group, I'm happy that we are here today. um, so if there are any questions, please put them in the chat, or we'll just keep going. Okay. The next one we had was, how can we set up event tracking to capture user interactions, like custom events, auto collected, or default? Okay, Gokul, I've seen that you had put some input in here. Maybe you want to get us started, and then we can all add.
Yeah, so I'll get started. So event tracking, which is the basic or essential for understanding user interactions on your website or mobile app. And Adobe Launch provides several methods for setting up event tracking to capture these interactions. And uh, so, as it was mentioned in the question, I'll go explain about the custom events. So custom events allow you to track specific user interactions that are not automatically captured by Adobe Analytics. So it is not by default. You can define these events based on your website requirements. To set up the custom events in Adobe Launch, this is a little bit technical, that you have to create a rule in Adobe Launch that triggers what that desired user interactions occurs. For example, like whether it is a button click, or if whether it is a form submission, or you are playing a video or something. Whatever the things that you are going to track, that has to be mentioned in that rule. So in the rule actions, you have to put the custom JavaScript code to send data to Adobe Analytics, specifying the custom events and any additional information that you want to capture, that you can include that in that particular code. So this is about the custom events. And regarding the auto collected events, and that is another way of uh, 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 getting those interactions. Like Adobe Analytics automatically collects some common user interactions by default. So such as like page views, clicks, uh, uh, or any kind of other interactions which are default. So to use auto collected events in Adobe Launch, uh, we need to ensure that the Adobe Analytics extension is properly configured in Adobe Launch, because after once that Adobe Analytics extension is properly configured, then only we will be able to uh, uh, track all those default events as well. So everything has to be configured in that Adobe Analytics extension, uh, based on that stakeholders requirements. So this is what uh, the event tracking is all about, custom events and auto collected events. So if you want to add something else, that you can go ahead.
Um, okay, looks like we can move on. I think we just have 3 minutes. Another question that came up was, how does Adobe Analytics handle data privacy and compliance with regulations like GDPR and consent management? Anyone wants to take this one?
Um, from my perspective and experience, we usually use a GDPR kind of provider and integrate that with Adobe Analytics. So there's things like OneTrust or Civic or any other provider, and you just have to make sure you implement it correctly so that Adobe Analytics only tracks data if the user is opted into the right categories. I think there are some features for consent in Adobe Launch, but I've never used the default. I think it's just that you just connect that with your actual privacy tool. So yeah, I don't have anything else to add there. But what we do is whenever we implement something as part of the QA process, we make sure that it only sends data, it only tracks data if the user is opted into the correct categories. I know it's not the same everywhere. It depends on the regulations you have in your country.
Yeah, we use OneTrust as well, especially because recently in Canada, Quebec passed the new Bill C-64, which caused us to have to make a lot of changes on how we track. So we've implemented using OneTrust for getting consent and making sure we're firing the right things. But also there are some features actually within Adobe. If you go into, I forget where in the admin settings it is exactly, but there's the option for IP obfuscation, which will obfuscate the last octet of the IP address. And they have a couple different settings for how to do it. So like you can either obfuscate the last octet, or I think it blocks the IP completely. And the different options have different impacts on where it happens in terms of processing and how the other geolocation fields come into the data. So definitely recommend like reviewing those and seeing which one works best for you based on the regulations of where you're operating.
Yeah, it also depends on which country sites you have. So if and it also would matter from where your visitor is coming. So that's something to keep in mind. But there are each company, each organization does it differently. Uh, as a rule, we do not collect any PII information within our Adobe Analytics tool. So uh, even though IP address is not directly one, we at this point have made that decision. It depends, like for each countryside or each company, how we work with. So that's something to keep in mind, because once you've collected that information, now you know that it stays there for some time. So uh, something to think about. We are at time. There are few more questions. We have those answers for you. We will park them and share that with you in the next office hours. But to those that have stayed with us all this while, thank you for joining in. And do spread the word that we have an EMEA APAC office hours, and we'd like to see more of your peer groups and anyone else who needs these questions answered. So do reach out. Any last words from the rest of the group?
No, thank you everyone for attending. The next EMEA office hours, we haven't set up the event yet, but it's going to be on April 18th at same time. So yeah, we'll hopefully see you all next month.
Great. Thanks,
Thanks,
everyone.
everyone. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.